Hello, welcome to Operation Freedom, a show for and about veterans here in the Prince William County region. I'm your host, Steve Botello, and today's special guest is an Army veteran, Bob Watson. Bob, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, what we try and talk about is your life story related to military. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida, and it was great living down there, in the sun and the fun. And I just had a great, childhood, did everything a young kid could possibly think of. I participated in athletics throughout junior high and high school, and I think that was my first taste of teamwork, and that would be something that I would draw on later in my military career.
Wow, that's great. When you were in high school, did you have any contact whatsoever with military persons or with a military lifestyle? Were you even thinking about the military as part of your world?
Well, a good friend of mine was a dependent of a retired Air Force NCO, senior NCO, and he had access to Homestead Air Force Base. I lived about 10 miles north of Homestead Air Force Base. And when his mother would go to the commissary, he'd invite me to come along, and he and I would go play 9 holes of golf while she was shopping at the commissary. And so that's something we did together, and we had a lot of fun. And but I never really thought about the military as a career.
So did you get a chance to meet his father or?
Oh yes, yeah. His father had been an aircraft mechanic.
Okay, there.
And actually built and restored Porsches. So as a young guy growing up, I spent a lot of time at their house looking at these beautiful Porsches that he was rebuilding. So
I can well imagine. So you graduated when? High school?
Graduated in 1979.
Okay.
And
then did you go into college, or what were you looking at after school?
yeah, from there I had applied to a couple of colleges and selected a college up in South Carolina, Furman University. It's up in Greenville, South Carolina. And it's best known as an arch rival of both VMI and the Citadel. So we played them in a lot of athletic conference games, both football and basketball.
So were you into athletics in college also?
Well, I realized when I got to college that it was a whole nother world. And I did go out for the track team, and I started looking at how much time that was going to consume, and started having some doubts about what I could really do for the track team. And I had a frank discussion with the track coach, and again a discussion that I drew on later in life in the military, on how important it is to just tell people the truth and tell them where they fit in. And he told me where I would fit in on the track team, and I just wasn't too happy with that. So at about that time, I went down and just took a military science course. I needed an elective, so I took one of the courses, and I liked it, but to me it was just another elective.
Right. So that gave you a little inkling of the military. So you went through college, and at what point in that, shall we say, life path, did you start saying, the military is a little bit more interesting?
Well, here's how it got interesting.
Okay.
I had taken that class, and college was expensive. This was a private university, and I realized I wasn't going to be able to pay for it. There weren't enough student loans to go around.
Right.
I was looking at a 5-year work-study program that a lot of corporations in Greenville actually participated in with college students. I was looking at a lot of different options, and my next-door neighbor in my dormitory said, well, go back down and just inquire about the program and take another class to get your grade point average up. They're easy classes. So quite literally, Steve, it went like this. I walked back downstairs, and I said, I'm looking for Colonel Morris, Lieutenant Colonel Morris. And he spun around, and he said, and he stuck his hand out, and he said, I'm Colonel Morris. How'd you like a scholarship?
Wow.
And I said, well, that's not exactly why I came down, but since we're here, let's go talk about it. And he says, I've got 3-year scholarships just sitting here, and nobody's applying for them. So how are your grades? And I said, well, average. And he says, you should apply anyway. So I applied. I was selected as an alternate, and really had no thought that I'd even get picked up. And one of the majors working in the ROTC department said, don't worry, there's always somebody who turns it down. And I got a call just before Christmas. I had been home for Christmas about 2 or 3 days, and the phone rang, and it was the ROTC department, and it was the major, and he said, Merry Christmas, how'd you like a scholarship? Somebody just turned it down, and you're the first alternate. So I said, I'll take it. So I was able to announce at Christmas dinner that I had just paid for college. And so the deal was the Army would pay for all tuition and books and necessary fees, and I owed them 6 years, you know, a mix of active duty and reserve.
Right.
And from there, it just took off, and I loved it. It was a way to apply my athletic ability, the teamwork that I really enjoyed. And we had a great cadet battalion, so I made lifelong friends that I'm still in contact with.
That's terrific. We had this same thing, the ROTC at my school. I didn't go into it. It wasn't until a few years later. So you graduated college, roughly when?
That was 1983.
83 is when you graduated. So then, did they already designate the type of officer you were going to be, or did you have options? I mean, how did that work for you?
Well, the scholarship students, one of the things that comes along with that is a regular Army commission. You have to agree to that and to go on active duty. That's what most people do, and that afforded me the opportunity to go to airborne school in the summer between my sophomore and my junior year.
Good for you.
And they try to get us the best training possible to prepare us for active duty. So I had made up my mind at that point I would go right from college into active duty. So
okay. And so when you went to active duty at that time, when at that point in that beginning of your career path were you able to select the specialty or you were going into, or did that happen later?
Well, we actually had a wish list that we filled out at the beginning of our senior year. And we had 4 choices. We had to pick 2 combat arms, a combat support, and a combat service support. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what all of them were, but obviously the combat support one was military intelligence, and so I was commissioned. I knew as a senior I'd be commissioned into the military intelligence corps.
And at that time, did you know much about that field? Is that something that you said, hey, I'm really going to excel in? Or were you, like most young people, going, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing,
right,
but I'm going to do it?
Said I'll do what the Army needs me to do, and I went out to the officer basic course and went through the training and then the specialty that they wanted me to serve in, and so that's what I did. And parts of the school were actually tough. I was surprised.
Really?
But it was a lot of fun.
Well, as you were going to this next phase of your life, what did you find to be one of the more challenging, where you kind of said to yourself, I'm not in school anymore. Now I'm having to do something. What were some of the, maybe 1 or 2 things that really dawned on you, this is real?
Well, that's a great question, because my first assignment was to Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia. I was assigned to an aerial exploitation battalion, and I had always loved aircraft. I had actually hoped to fly, but that's not what the Army had in mind for me. So I was thrilled to be assigned to an aviation unit, and it was a intelligence unit, and we spent a lot of time in Latin America, in Honduras in the mid-'80s, and that was at the time of the Salvadoran problems there, the Civil War there, the guerrillas, and so we had a lot of work to do in that region, and so I found myself immediately going into an area where there was potential problems because our aircraft were subject to being shot down, and so I had to, as an intelligence officer, understand the threat and communicate that effectively to the pilots before they went out on their missions. And that's when I realized, I might be a second lieutenant, but what I'm telling these guys could actually save their lives. So it was definitely real right from the beginning.
From the get-go. Well, so you were at Hunter. What was your next duty station after that?
Well, from there I went up to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and was assigned as a platoon leader. And again, a little bit more of a challenge. It was an interrogation platoon. It was large. It was between 55 and 60 people, and very, very smart soldiers. And that is still, to this day, one of my favorite assignments, because I just enjoyed working, with the soldiers. But these are smart soldiers, men and women. They all knew another language, at least one other language fluently, and some knew 2 or 3 languages.
Wow.
And so I found that as a leader, the challenge was leading smart people, because they'll ask more questions and they're very intuitive. And so I found that that was not written in the leadership books anywhere, that you really, really had to be on your game to lead that type of a platoon.
Wow. Can you talk much at all about some of the more interesting areas you might have been deployed during this time phase of your career?
Well, we really didn't deploy at that time. This was the mid-'80s, but I was in the intelligence brigade that directly supported the 18th Airborne Corps. So we always had to be on call, ready to go at moment's notice. I literally had a rucksack packed that was in my trunk, and we all had to have that because of the recall requirements. We had 2 hours from the time of a phone call to, report into the battalion.
Wow.
Ready for whatever could await us. And we were alerted a few times during my time there. And thankfully it didn't turn into anything. But that's another dose of reality when you realize you're driving in. You think, I could be 5 days from now, I could be on the other side of the world, in the middle of an invasion. So because of that, we had the best equipment, we had focused training, and everybody knew that they had a purpose in their mission. And that was really, really important.
So you were roughly, how far into your Army career were you at this point?
Well, that was, let's see, that would have been the mid-'80s, so probably 3 years, 3 or 4 years.
Give or take. At that time, had you yet felt and said to yourself, I think I might make this a career?
No, I still hadn't decided. I was still 3 years into it, and then I got a call one day, and they said, hey, we have a slot at the advanced course, and maybe that would be a good time to go. I was on the verge of making captain, and I said, okay. So shortly after making captain, I went out to my advanced course training and really enjoyed that, and was then introduced to a whole nother type of the intelligence field. I'd worked tactical,
right.
And then I was exposed to the strategic side after that. I was assigned to the Intelligence and Security Command.
So when you went to this next level, next phase of your career, was that kind of the eye-opener there, or were you still going,
Well, I really enjoyed the assignments after that. They were challenging. I was able to see a much broader spectrum of what intelligence can provide to the battlefield commander and what it can provide to policymakers. And so I found it to be very challenging and very interesting work. And I said, well, maybe I'll just go 10 years and get out at that time. But the assignments kept getting better and better, and I would say midway through my time as a captain, I said, I'll do the 20 years. Because
this is going to be kind of a different question. What can you talk to people about in relation to intelligence that of what's the real truth versus what they see on TVs and movies? You understand what I'm saying?
Right. It's, I had a senior warrant officer tell me one time, he said, Lieutenant, this is my first assignment. And he said, Lieutenant, being an intelligence officer is a lot like being a weatherman. So you might as well get used to it. When you make the right call, you're a hero. When you make the wrong call, everybody hates you. So I said, well, gee, thanks, Chief, for that advice. But in many ways, that turned out to be true. You can use all the sensors in the world just like they do in the weather. They have satellites, intelligence has satellites. You have people on the ground reporting. Intelligence has people on the ground reporting. There's a lot of similarities, and it's always not exactly right. You never quite get it right because there's a delta. There's just some information you'll never know, and that's what makes it challenging. So the first answer is always wrong. That's an old adage in the intelligence business. You have to keep digging to make sure you get the bosses the best information in the most timely way possible.
So would it be fair to say there are no absolutes?
Right, because the situation changes rapidly in the intelligence business. And another old adage that you may be familiar with, and a lot of the viewers are, is that the best war plan in the world doesn't survive first contact, because at that point the other side has a vote. So you can plan up until the point that the first shot is fired, and then after that you have to adapt and adjust.
That's true.
So the enemy's doing it, so we have to do it as well.
That's true. So now that you're at this, you've just made captain. You're at this new assignment. You're learning more. I believe you said at the strategic level. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Do they give you any options as to your choice of alternative paths to go, or within the intelligence structure? Are there different, I guess, strategic or pathways that an intelligence officer can choose to go down for more of a specialty?
Well, that's kind of decided at the advanced course.
Okay.
And if they have and when there's a particular part of the intelligence specialties where they don't have enough people, then you come around and they'll talk to you and say, hey, we really need more people over here. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to go here and do that? So if you needed additional specialty, you would get it at the advanced course. But I was in a low-density specialty when I went out to the basic course.
Right.
So I just stayed there. So it worked out well for me. So.
Okay. So now we're in the mid to late 80s. Is that correct in your career?
Right. Around in 1980, 1990, about the time that Panama, we had the Panama experience, and I went down there right after the shooting stopped and helped with a lot of the post-combat intelligence work that had to be done to help put everything back together. And it wasn't long after that we rolled into Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So.
Well, that brings up a good time period, because I was in there in that time also, and I remember the fall of the Soviet Union and the domino effect that was happening. And that I think if I recall, it was like 15 to 18 months. It was like one after another after another. Then the next thing you know, the Berlin Wall's coming down. And it was, for myself, who'd grown up during that time period, were you guys surprised at that all these things happened so quickly?
Well, I think they were surprised the way it happened, and President Gorbachev kept his policy of glasnost and openness going. President Reagan kept the heat on, and President Bush, the father, did the same thing after winning the election. And so we finally reached that point where it did just start to come unraveled, and they came unraveled very quickly. And then President Bush made the decision that, hey, we're not going to dance on the objective, so to speak. We need to engage them in a positive way to make sure that their transition is peaceful, and we need to welcome them into the world of nations. Right. And do it in a so that was a very volatile time for the intelligence business. Trying to figure out, okay, there's no more Soviet Union, but where did all the nukes go? Where are all the tanks? Who's got what? And what could happen next? So it changed the dynamic of the focus.
Yeah, of what if.
Of the what if scenarios were changing rapidly.
You're right, and it was. I remember that time. It was interesting. It was thrilling in many ways, because My military career was generally focused on one bad guy, and now suddenly they're not there anymore, but things quickly change dynamically in the world, thus leading us into Desert Shield as a storm. And during that time phase, what were you up to?
Well, my boss got a call one day and said, "Hey, you know the work that you did in Panama with senior POWs?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "We'd like the same thing, you know, in the Middle East in case we have to go to war. So get a team together and get them over here. Get over here quick." So I got a call literally on New Year's Eve. And he said, "Bob, I know this is really bad timing, but I just got a call from, you know, a senior intelligence officer, a general, who wants me to put a team together and come and do what we did in Panama." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "So I'll see you, you know, enjoy your New Year's Eve, and I'll see you on Monday." And within 10 days, I was in Saudi Arabia after that.
Wow.
So, you know, ramping up, getting ready for the kickoff of Desert Storm.
Now, before you got that call, you're a bright man, and you have some significant life experience. I'm sure in the back of your mind going, I'll bet that phone's going to ring fairly soon.
Well, you always expect it, and you know, and in a way, that's what you know you want. I mean, that's what we're trained to do,
Right.
and everybody, you know, wants to participate. The thought of, you know, not going when other people are going is difficult, you know, for a lot of people. When you've trained your whole life to do something, then when that opportunity comes, in a way, we all want to go.
Yep.
But you know, our loved ones don't like to hear that a lot of times. But
That's true, but it's like practicing football for, you know, years and years and years. Finally, you get a chance to play a game, and quite frankly, you want to be part of it.
yeah. So it was time to suit up.
So, fast forward, you're there. What were some of the 2 or 3 challenges you had in ramping up?
Well, it was interesting work. I did work with POWs. We worked with senior POWs, the Iraqi generals, and other prisoners of special interest. That was kind of our charter, because we really had to understand what Iraq had been through and how Saddam had run his inner circle, and how this was leading up to the invasion of Kuwait, and how all that was working. And so we had the opportunity to talk with, you know, several Iraqi generals, and it was interesting because many of them had been educated in the West. Some of them spoke fluent English, and you know, they're, at the end of the day, they were soldiers that wanted to take care of their troops. I remember one saying, "I surrendered the minute I felt the ground rumbling because I knew that the American army was coming, and I could not stand the thought of slaughtering these men just for Saddam Hussein. These men have mothers and fathers, and they're in my care. So I did what I thought was right." So,
Did you expect the amount of POWs as everyone else was so surprised?
I don't think anybody did.
Okay.
But one interesting experience, just to show the how they thought and the regime from which they came. We were transporting some between 2 camps, and it got dark, and I realized, you know, we've got to feed these guys. It's getting to be sunset, and we were respecting their prayer time. And he did say that he wanted to stop and pray, and I knew there was a logistics depot up ahead, and so I apologized that it was already dark, but I promised him we'd stop. And then we got to the turnoff, and I almost missed it, so I had to slam the brakes on, turn and go down into the desert. And he started, you know, I could hear him talking, and I didn't know what he was doing. And the interpreter said, "Sir, he's praying. He thinks we're going to take him out and shoot him." And I said, "Assure him that that's not what we're going to do." And when we pulled up to the logistics area, he actually got out of the car and got down on his knees and thanked me for not executing him. He was convinced, based on everything he heard, that we were going to execute him. And we didn't. We let him go over and pray, and we went in and got food, and shared a short meal, and then moved on. So it was a very surreal experience in many ways.
Wow. I thank you for talking about that. Let's fast forward. We're short on time. So you're at what point in your career? Now, you're about 2/3 through, is that correct?
Well, around halfway,
About
I
halfway
think, by
through.
that point.
Can you give us a little bit more highlights or just a few things in a short version, about a minute?
Well, I mean, from there, I had numerous command and staff positions. I did a tour at the Pentagon as a major, and took command after that, and had a chance to serve in our embassy in Berlin, Germany, on an assignment there, and that my family, really enjoyed that. And I commanded as a colonel in Japan, and then when Iraqi freedom came along, I had to deploy, and I commanded a element in Iraq as well. So that posed a whole another set of challenges, but it really was the epitome of my career in many ways, to be able to command highly trained people in a combat zone. And it just simply didn't get any better than that. And they all did well. I was proud of them.
And you retired when?
So I retired in 2009.
Okay. And now what do you do?
So I'm a defense contractor here in the area, and we'll just see where that takes me from there.
Good for you. We thank you for your service. Thank you for the time. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and chat with us on our show. We may have to bring you back, because I want to hear about more details about the second
There's
half.
tons, but no, I appreciate it, and it was good talking with you today.
Not a problem. That's our show here for Operation Freedom. I'm your host, Steve Botello, and I thank you for watching, and I thank all the veterans out there for your service. Have a good day.